and sorry, the messages came through, and long-term success of the programs. But today we're really going to focus specifically on the tool in the program that Enpro Industries has utilized and helped us on our way to our cultural transformation. We had a lot of people asking for some specifics on this information, and we thought it'd be great to try this out on a webinar type format and see if this is something that people find valuable so we can continue to do this down the road. Before we get right into the subject matter, I do think it would be worthwhile to give a little bit of background on Enpro Learning System and Enpro Industries. I'm not sure where everybody on the webinar today has heard about us from, but I want to make sure that you understand what our core business is and really the background of the development of SafetyFirst. So first and foremost, Enpro Industries is a worldwide manufacturer of engineered products. You can see the many different divisions of Enpro there on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you're familiar with any of those names, you can see that we are comprised of what I would refer to as medium to heavy-duty manufacturing. And we face the safety challenges of businesses operating in that area. We manufacture products ranging from gaskets to high-performance seals, that seal nuclear reactors, to large diesel engines for ships, as well as backup power generation. We bend, twist, and grind metal every day, and we have some extremely hazardous operations such as foundries, chemical plating lines, and a lot of hazardous equipment within our facilities. And over the last several years, Enpro has been on a journey and has helped establish a strong culture of safety throughout our business. And that has led us to be 3 times named as one of America's safest companies by EHS Today. And through our progression and transformation, we also have had the opportunity to work with businesses outside of Enpro, which is the Enpro Learning Systems or ELS division that you see up on that screen. We offer assistance and guidance to organizations outside of Enpro, focusing on safety leadership, safety cultural change, behavior-based safety, and organizational change in general. Before we move into the SafetyFirst program, again, trying to hit on that thought process of why the development of SafetyFirst, I wanted to explore Enpro Industries' experience with BBS. And some of you may be familiar with this from a previous webinar, but I do think it's worthwhile to provide that background before moving into the content once again. And so, like many companies, when we were looking to really try to have an impact on the habits and behaviors and decisions of everybody here within the workforce from a safety perspective, we began looking at many of the off-the-shelf BBS programs that are out there. I would like to say that we looked at all of them, although I can't definitively say that, but we certainly reviewed all of the potential options that were out there and decided on one that we felt was best for our business. That particular program focused on obviously training for employees, but really started with the supervisory level, and it focused on behavioral observations as well. Those observations were set up to be performed by management and safety committee members at our various sites across the globe. And at this stage of our progression, I would say we had the beginnings of our culture created, but we still had plenty of work that needed to happen there. And obviously we still have room for us to continue to grow and develop as well moving forward. But at this stage, we were really early on in our cultural transformation. And we spoke about the importance of safety and setting safety as a priority, but we had yet to progress into this creation of safety as a core value of the business and as a core value of all of the people within the business. We also were focused on the implementation of what I would refer to now as some outdated types of programs when it came to the BBS perspective. We really simply just did not focus on culture and value and how that related to the habits of excellence. But through this program, we obviously saw some initial gains. Whenever you perform training and focus on safety, I believe that you'll see some gains, but we rather quickly began to see those gains taper off. And while we could get our performance to what I would call good, we certainly were not to that level of great or where we wanted to be as an organization, striving towards that zero injury state. Anytime you research behavior-based safety, you'll see some of these same statements, or if you talk to people who have been in the programs and had experience here, but we soon began to hear that observations were simply being done to meet the metric. Employees were to be blamed for all accidents, and that's the way our behavior-based safety program really was focused. I don't believe that this is necessarily true, but perceptions obviously are a reality in a way, and we had to pay attention to the words that we were receiving back. And so through all that, we realized that we needed to have a change. If we wanted to get to this next level of performance, we really needed to change several things with our program, but one of those was obviously our behavior-based safety program. I know that I've shared this example before, but I do think it's kind of indicative of where we were before we made the change to SafetyFirst. And I won't get into all the specifics, but an incident that comes to mind involved an operator reaching into a machine to try and move our products through a process, and he was involved in an incident. In this particular case, we had a malfunctioning sensor. The employees in the area were aware that this was malfunctioning. They had reported it, but a fix never came through. And so in an effort to make sure that our products were getting out the door and we were satisfying our customers, our employees, I feel, were trying to do a good job in meeting those objectives, and they found a way to make sure they were able to still move forward. At first, that involved using a stick to reach into a machine to depress the switch that would allow our products to keep moving through. But once that stick was not there, it eventually led to a gentleman putting his hand in that machine to try to activate this particular process. As you can imagine, the timing did not work out in this case, and the employee actually had their hand begin to get pulled into the machine. Thankfully, he was able to kick an e-stop and get his hand out without any serious long-term injury, but we still had a pretty serious laceration that was sustained in the process. And as we started going through the incident investigation, one of the root causes that ended up on the injury report was complacency. And I remember a meeting with the manager of the area and with supervisors of the area, and I remember one of the individuals there speaking up and stating, that's right, complacency was a root cause. He should have known better than to stick his hand in the machine. That was not what was intended with the root cause of complacency on that incident investigation. Rather, it was the complacency of leadership and of management. It was complacency on us as a business, complacency on the manager, on the supervisor, myself in an EHS role. We all failed to take action and fix a simple, unsafe condition, but yet, at the end of the day, instead of looking in the mirror, it was easy to point the finger. So that was, one of the issues that became loud and clear, that through this program, we were actually heading in the wrong direction from a cultural perspective, and from a leadership perspective, we really needed to take some time to develop as leaders, to change the way that we did business, as well as operate every day when it comes to safety. And so that's kind of where the journey started for us before we really took a step back and tried to focus on the creation of SafetyFirst. I think that may be pretty similar to some of the positions that some of you may find yourselves in, but I wanted to make sure that we at least touch base on that. It's so easy to simply try to roll a product out, you check the box, you got it done, without taking the time beforehand to really make sure that you're in the best possible position for that rollout, best possible position for the sustainability of that program and follow-up of that program and continued education in that program. And I'm going to try to touch base on all those as we go through this webinar today, but we're going to really begin by focusing on Module 1 of SafetyFirst and where that's going to take us. But before I get into that, we're going to move on to this next slide here. So again, we soon realized we needed to make some changes, and we focused on some key characteristics when we started developing SafetyFirst. First, we needed something customizable and adaptable. We are an acquisition-heavy business. We're acquiring different types of businesses all the time, and we really needed a program that was easy to go out and implement, that was adaptable to their specific challenges, their specific needs, really have an impact on the cultural development and not just on making sure we're doing observations and things of that nature. And one common failure method of any BBS program is a failure to focus on behaviors that are specific to the individuals that are using the program. If we're talking about behaviors that do not directly relate to our people, then they start to lose interest very quickly. And so we needed a program that, regardless of what company you worked in of ours, regardless of what type of industry you might be working in, the program could still be adaptable to your specific needs, your specific wants. In fact, part of the program in Module 3 that we'll touch base on is actually employees creating specific triggers for their department, for their business, things that they can relate to each and every day. Secondly, we knew that the only way to have true success was to really impact and develop that internal value or ethic or belief of every individual. Without a formal means of developing that internal ethic and commitment, the program could only be so successful. We still need people, when they recognize the safe or unsafe act, or if they're presented with the opportunity to choose a safe behavior or unsafe behavior, we need to influence that internal side of the individual to get them to lean towards that safe decision each and every time, and have them understand why they are doing that for themselves as well as for others. This led to the creation of Safety My Voice. We're going to talk about that today. It's an integral piece in Module 1 as well as Module 4. But I wanted to point out that going back to that original map that you saw, where we are located throughout the globe, and we've been using SafetyFirst now for going on 7-8 years. It has proven to be successful regardless of where we implement it from a geographic perspective, and has really been one of the key programs that has helped us create this immediate cultural shift in the new acquisitions as well as our long-standing businesses. Within Enpro, we look at behavior-based safety as having these 4 critical components. Again, I don't want to repeat messages I've shared in other webinars, so I'd encourage you to go to our website and check out the webinars on behavior-based safety. But culture, leadership, value, and habits of excellence are all critical for a successful BBS program. I have the slide up here not to go into specifics on each and every one of these, but more so as a reminder that, first of all, BBS is not a fix-all program. Behavior-based safety cannot simply be implemented and take the place of other core programs and developmental areas that businesses need to go through, but also to make sure that we understand some things need to take place, in my opinion, before a BBS program should be implemented. For example, there really needs to be some work at that cultural level and the leadership level before we start to place focus on each and every person's individual habits or behaviors. We need to have a culture that's in place where people are looking out for one another, that people are able to be engaged in the safety program, in the safety system, having an intentional structure to our organization to allow that to happen. And our leadership needs to obviously be the catalyst for this type of cultural change. If we as leaders don't change the way we do business, but expect others to change the way they perform their individual tasks, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure. People are not blind, obviously, and they see the things that are going on. They see the actions. They see the conversations coming from the leadership of the business. And if the things that are coming out of our mouth are not aligning with our actions, that is going to be very clear to the workforce. So I believe it's really important for the leadership to do some self-reflection, make sure that we are constantly striving to become stronger in our safety leadership every day. I believe that the behavioral change should start with leadership. One of the components of our SafetyFirst program is a leadership checklist where we ask leaders to go through and make sure that we're doing the things every single week, every single month. They're exhibiting the behaviors that are going to be supportive of our safety culture and programs like SafetyFirst. Before we jump into Module 1, I talked about culture. I thought I would share a quick video snippet from one of our safety summits. Maria will talk to you a little while later about what our safety summits, our upcoming safety summits, but we invite people into our Enpro facilities twice a year. Well, we get to hear from our executive leadership, you get to hear from our safety professionals, you get to go tour one of our plants and see our system in action. But the most important part to me is we enable time for you, for guests to spend with our frontline operators. And this video is an example of one of those Q&A sessions. And I think that these colleagues of ours within Enpro do a great job of describing the culture.
we have a culture inside of the plant that we watch each other's back. And I'm comfortable going out and looking after my coworkers. If I see somebody that's doing something that's not exactly, I don't think it's safe, I'm comfortable approaching them. And that's the culture we've developed over a period of years, is watching each other's back. And it works. Granted, we have a lot of training go on, but at the end of the day, it's a simple matter of looking out for each other.
It's owned by everybody. The safety culture is owned by management, and it makes a big difference.
And you don't learn everything from one person. It takes multiple people to really collaborate, and everybody learn from that.
We truly care about each other. And it took a while, but we're there. And we don't let it lapse.
It's a unique place to work at. A lot of people have come from different plants, different working environments, and this is totally unique to anything, working anywhere in my career.
We shut down the plant for 2 days at the beginning of the year. It's a fun activity. It's like, hey, we know the first 2 days we come back from into the new year is fun safety stuff that we just practicing, getting everybody in the swing of things.
A few days I walk into the facility, and at some point during the day, I don't have something safety oriented handed to me, or somebody approach me with something. And I think everybody can say that. Like I say, we keep it in the forefront, and it's always on our minds.
Okay, sorry about that. I did see some comments coming in about being unable to hear the video, so hopefully that worked for most. I tried to put my computer up to my speaker really quick, but Kyle, Maria, if you're in the background, maybe you can help make sure that's taken care of before the next one. But that video is also up on our website, so if you did miss it, I would encourage you to go take a look at it. I think it just helps, again, communicate the cultural side of things that we're looking for, and the state that we have to be with truly caring about one another and looking out for one another before we're overly focused on the individual's behaviors. If there's a perception that this could be a program to get people in trouble or just for the metrics or whatever those other reasons may be, I think it obviously can create a hindrance to a successful program, whereas if people are fully and fundamentally aligned with we're doing this for each other because we care enough to say something when we see something, I think you're in a much better position to be successful. This slide here, again, there is a video that's incorporated into the SafetyFirst program to help explain our approach to a safety culture in general and cultural change. But I do think it's worthwhile to mention this very briefly. And I think you'll be able to see my pointer that, if you look at the y-axis and the x-axis, on the right-hand side of the screen, you have exterior facing. On the left-hand side of the screen, you have interior facing. At the top of the screen is the individual, and at the bottom is the collective or the community. And in order to really fully develop a safety culture, I think we need to look at it from a perspective of addressing all four individual quadrants. So, for example, on the lower right-hand side, what are the things that the community puts in place to manage or to affect the things that people do in an exterior fashion? And usually those are systems and rules and policies and procedures and things of that nature. Usually there's some cultural development of the community as a whole, whether that's your company values, whether that's certain things that happen within your business that just make you who you are. And then up here at the top, we oftentimes try to focus on what the individual is doing as well exteriorly. And so this is where behavior-based safety tends to come into play, and where recognition programs or incentive programs or things of that nature really come into play. What types of things can we do that influences what people are doing when they're around others? But one area that's often overlooked is this upper left-hand quadrant, this interior side of the individual. And it's a really hard area to impact, obviously, but changing human behavior is fundamentally difficult to do, and I think almost impossible to do if we can't have some impact on their internal way of thinking. even if we give the best training in the world, even if we point out what all the safe or unsafe behaviors are, if we truly haven't touched that person, I think that you're not going to get to that level of success that at least I'm striving for. And so we are going to talk a little bit about how we try to influence that upper left-hand quadrant, that internal component of each individual as we move through Module 1, and that's going to be through the Safety My Voice side of things. So just an outline of the SafetyFirst program in general. It's made up of 4 individual modules. The module that we're going to be talking about today is obviously making the connection, our Kerrs acronym for our general conditions or general behaviors. In Module 2, we really focus heavily on what is going on at the facility where we're conducting this training. Again, going back to that mindset that if we're focused on behaviors that don't relate to the workforce, we're bound to be unsuccessful. This is where we actually take time to look through what's happened within this particular business from a metrics perspective, what injuries are happening, what near misses are happening, what safety opportunities are we seeing, and really try to get a good understanding of the things that are leading up and causing any instance that we might have. This is also a great opportunity to be doing training for your entire workforce on things like recordability or however you guys break down your incidents. I think most of the folks on the phone today are from the U.S., but some are not, and so the OSHA recordability would be U.S.-centric. But if you talk about your own metrics in your own way within your business, this would be a good way to really communicate what all of that means. I oftentimes will walk through companies or businesses and see metrics up on the wall with DART rates or lost time rates or medical treatment case rates, and no one on the floor really understands what they mean. They're there for them to read and to see, but they truly don't grasp the meaning behind some of those metrics. And so this area really helps us overcome that, get everybody engaged in what the classification process is, and it gives them the background to really be making some significant contributions to the behavior-based safety program in Module 3. SafetyFirst comes with some specific triggers. There's some to choose from. I'll highlight some of those as we go through. But these triggers are really designed to be that antecedent that jumps into people's minds when, right before they have an unsafe act. What comes to mind from a driving perspective that's a similar type of trigger is click it or ticket on the highway. Everybody who's seen that knows exactly what that means. It can be that quick trigger for some when they get in the vehicle. I've got to remember to put my seatbelt on. Obviously, there would be a negative consequence in this particular case with a ticket, but that's kind of what I mean about a trigger, this quick, catchy slogan that jumps right out, that catches your attention and helps you to redirect your actions before an unsafe act has actually taken place. One of our first triggers, for example, was don't feel the steel. Given what I described about our business earlier, you might predict that lacerations are a substantial risk for our operations. And so in an effort to really get a handle on all lacerations, first aids, all types of lacerations, we rolled out this trigger, don't feel a steel. And so if you're using a cutting tool or handling metal without some cut-resistant PPE or other tools to eliminate that hazard, that should be the trigger that jumps in and you go and get the appropriate equipment or tools before you do the job. Lastly, in Module 4, this is where we start to touch base on really how do we show that we're caring for one another? How do we share the good news, the bad news? How do we learn from the things that have already taken place and make sure that they don't happen again? And how do we conduct observations in a way that's going to make sure that we're providing beneficial feedback to the people we're observing, having beneficial safety conversations, and really closing out the behavior-based program. So, in Module 1, we're just going to go through this. Is exactly how you'd see the presentation if you were to roll this out and begin training, but we'll jump right in. And the objectives of this module are first and foremost to understand and recognize the general behaviors or general conditions that might put us in an unsafe situation. I'm only going to show you a snippet for sake of time, but we utilize a video in this training program called Choose Safety. It's a personal experience of one of our employees that has gone through a work-related injury and the impact that's had on him and his family. And I'll explain why we roll that out and why we include that as part of this program. And then we'll also begin the introduction to safety my voice and the I statements and this ethic and this value creation within the individual. So to begin with, SafetyFirst is really a program that's designed to help us to recognize specific opportunities to be safer. It relies on our colleagues to be aware and helping each other place safety first, and its intent is to influence habits while recognizing that it's done from a perspective of trying to make the workplace safer. The Kerrs acronym that we've been talking about, that I've been talking about, you can see what it stands for there on the screen, but these are the general conditions or general behaviors that we feel contribute to unsafe acts, unsafe behaviors within the workplace. Obviously, we have the control emotions, anticipate, being responsible for our actions as well as the actions of those around us, remaining engaged in the work and task at hand, and then working at a safe pace. And we'll go through each and every one of these things here individually as we go through. So first and foremost, the controlling our emotions and how that relates to an unsafe situation within the workplace. I think everybody can think back on a time in your own personal life or work life where we may have been in a heightened emotional state, whether that's being angry or frustrated or sad or anxious, or even having a great moment and reacting strongly could lead to a potentially unsafe situation. What we want to make sure that we communicate while focusing on this general condition is that we all experience this wide variety of emotions throughout the day. What's important is that we're cognizant of what's going on within us as individuals and how that might have an impact on what we are there at work to do. This could be as simple as taking a few minutes to walk away from the situation to cool down if you're in a frustrating circumstance or you're getting upset at someone for a conversation that you're in. It could be a process like a check-in process that we utilize within our business. This could be at the start of a meeting or at shift start or when we're beginning a safety observation, but a check-in process is simply informing others of where you're at mentally before we begin a conversation. It really helps others to understand that, if we're going into a meeting session and I were to check in and provide some feedback, maybe that, I had a rough morning, rushing to get kids up and out of the house, and I'm running late, and I've been feeling behind all day. People may understand, if I'm a little short in my dialogue, where exactly that's coming from. And I think it's also extremely beneficial when it comes to the behavioral observations. For example, it's really easy, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this in the past, where you might see somebody walk up to perform a safety observation, and the first thing out of their mouth is, I can't believe you're doing that. That's so unsafe. What are you doing? And really come out as an aggressive side of things. Or, sometimes we ask questions simply because we don't know what's going on, and we may or may not be correct about what we're seeing. There are times where I walk up to an operation and it does not look safe to me, but at the same point in time, I don't have the experience level of the people performing the task. And I think it's important to let them know that, hey, I know that you've been doing this job for 25 years and you know a heck of a lot more than I do when it comes to, let's say, operating a lathe. But standing over there, this looks like it could be hazardous and it concerns me, and so I'd like to take a minute to talk about it and see what you're doing to help protect yourself. It's a fundamentally different conversation. And so I think it's really important to recognize methodology to either understand what condition we're in and help get ourselves out of it, but also communicate to others where we're at mentally and why we're approaching a situation in a certain way. But again, I'm sure that everybody here can relate back to a situation where emotions may be high. Road rage comes to mind, right? We get upset that somebody does something and we get really worked up. Next thing you know, we're creating or committing unsafe acts or committing unsafe behaviors simply because we are frustrated at the actions of somebody else. The next part of the acronym here is the anticipate, the A in anticipate. And it's very often that people will go and try to perform a task and just really not think it through ahead of time. And it's a behavior that really needs to get ingrained in folks and anticipate what could happen if things don't go right. It's often, it's so easy to take a look at a situation. Yep, everything here is going to work perfectly. Nobody's going to have any problems, and we just go without really even taking the time to look things through. And so we always want to make sure that if we're performing a new process, or if we're creating a new product, or we're doing something that we don't normally do, it's a once in a while type of initiative, whatever that might be, that we're really driving the behavior of always taking that time to step back, think about what we need to do, think about what could go wrong and ways to make sure that we mitigate those hazards. We utilize several different tools to help aid us in this process. JSA forms on the back of work orders for maintenance who oftentimes find themselves in these situations, making sure that we do pre-task planning discussions and things of that nature. But those tools are only as effective as the behaviors. If you have the tools in place but nobody acts on them, they don't do you a whole lot of good. And so we really need to focus on creating this habit and driving home this behavior of always looking with an anticipatory eye as to what could potentially take place. Next, we'll move into the responsible condition. And again, I think this is a behavior that is learned and not necessarily intuitive for all. I think most people come to work understanding that they're responsible for their actions, but I think we need to take that a step further, and I believe that we have within our business. It's not simply enough to come to work and look out for yourself. It's a condition of employment that we're always looking out for one another. And looking out for whether that be visitors or customers or coworkers, whoever that is. If somebody's doing something next to you that's unsafe and you don't say something, then you just flat out don't mean it. And we need to get to the point where we are truly our brother's keeper, and that we're always looking out for one another whenever we have that opportunity. Some examples of things I've heard over the years are, it's management's responsibility to make my job safe. People hand over their safety to somebody else to manage. I mean, there is some truth to this statement that, as a company, we are responsible for providing certain things, but when it comes down to the behaviors of each individual, each and every one of us can do something to make the conditions safer. I hear this a lot when it comes to things like near-miss reporting, safety opportunity reporting. There's an issue and it's reported, and there's this expectation that somebody else will fix it and come back to me and tell me how they fixed it, instead of me having engagement in that process. And through this training, we really try to drive home that level of responsibility, that it's not just enough to raise the issue. We've got to be part of the solution to those issues as well. We have responsibility for what happens. We all have individual responsibility for what happens in this workplace. Therefore, we all have to be looking out for each other in that way. Another common I get like this out of this type of training, I don't get paid to do that. And I again, don't necessarily believe with this type of statement. We don't just pay you to come to work and do a simple task. I fundamentally believe that we pay you to come and be a productive member of our team that contributes in a safe fashion all the time. I hear from time to time, we can't discipline this person for that behavior because they're our best employee. I just don't see how those two things can go together. You can't have a person be your best employee if they don't take their individual safety and the safety of those people around them first and foremost. But this is really an area where we want to try to stimulate discussion with the training sessions as to what we mean by this level of responsibility. And again, raise that bar. It's not enough just to come and put my head down and make sure I don't get hurt today. I have to come. I am responsible for coming to work, helping to do what I'm here to do, as well as make our safety system better and look out for everybody while I'm here. The next condition is remain focused, and this is the E in engaged. And so we need to make sure that everybody is fully engaged whenever they are here at work. It's really easy to let your mind wander, be thinking about something else. It's easy to just kind of take time off mentally if you're doing a task that you've done a million times, but we need to make sure that regardless of what we're doing, we're remaining engaged in the task at hand at all times. One thing that comes to mind, again, a driving example is driving down the highway trying to get home, and next thing you know, you've passed by your exit. And so clearly mind was elsewhere, and we just drove right on by and kept on going without really paying attention to what we were doing. Or perhaps some of you have had that experience where you arrive at home, but you really can't recall a portion of that drive on the way home. Your mind was elsewhere, you're singing along with the radio, you're thinking about a conversation you had at work, whatever that is. we really need to try to drive home that point of remaining focused on the task at hand and coming up with methodology to help people do that. And I think there's a lot of different tools that can be implemented here, but again, it comes down to a behavioral choice, removing distractions, making sure that we're not talking about the football game on Sunday while we're operating heavy equipment or not remaining engaged. There's a behavioral component that we need to continue to drive home for each and every student of the training. Safe pace, that's the S in Kerrs. This does not mean slow. I make that statement every time. A safe pace does not necessarily mean a slow pace. We need to understand the task, understand what the appropriate pace is for that particular task, and then make sure that we're working that way. And we also, as a leadership team, just to point out, need to make sure that the things that are coming out of our mouths, our behaviors, are not adversely affecting these conditions. And this is one where I see them having more effect than many of the other behaviors. Oftentimes when we begin work, good morning, how's everybody doing? Okay, we got to get this many parts out the door today. Have a good day, and off they go. And so the last word they heard from leadership essentially was, let's make sure we get all these things out the door today, and we're driving that particular behavior. If I think back to that instance I tried to describe earlier, the individual that was caught in that machine was trying to accomplish or trying to live up to the value that we had as a business. Our customers, we had total customer value. That was our value. We do whatever it takes to help satisfy our customers. And so I'm sure that he was fully aware reaching the machine was not a good idea. I'm sure he did not intend to put himself in harm's way. He certainly did not expect to have an injury, but the reasons why he did were to help our business get a product out the door to our customers. And I'm sure that there was a verbal trigger somewhere along the lines from leadership that helped create that mentality in this individual. And so we really need to be cognizant of the things that we say and the programs that we implement. You think back to incentive programs, pay for performance come to mind. Those types of things obviously would have a direct contradiction to us saying, slow down, do things at the safe pace, if out of the other side of our mouths we're offering some sort of incentive for people to work faster or longer or harder, whatever that might be. And so again, one thing that is difficult to communicate via a webinar, but it's an integral part of the SafetyFirst program, is really learning from one another. And so for each and every one of those acronyms, or each and every one of those conditions there, we would want the students to break out into working groups and discuss, what does this particular condition mean to you? What does it mean to you? How do you understand that condition? Can you describe a scenario that you've been in, whether it's in the workplace or outside the workplace, and sharing methodology and ways that we might be able to help overcome those particular conditions as part of the training. I think this learning from one another is extremely important and extremely beneficial to the outcome at the end. And so in the workbooks themselves, they would guide you through these group exercises that you can conduct with your employees. I mentioned this a moment ago, this Choose Safety video. And again, the video itself is 10 plus minutes long, and I just don't have the time to share the entire video on this particular webinar, but I do think it's worthwhile explaining why this is included in the program. Before I do that, I'm going to actually share the snippet and then talk a little bit about it afterwards, but to kick this off a little bit, the full video, the objective is really help drive the reality of a workplace incident. In this particular case, there was amputations, finger amputations, and I ask this question a lot when I go around and train as to how many people think that that's really a traumatic injury. And more often than not, everybody raises their hands, but I also think that many of us can think of at least one person that has had an amputation, a finger, an arm, a leg, whatever it happens to be. And it still tends to be one of the most common injuries in the U.S. And so while we look at it as being traumatic, I think we also tend to forget about these things as time goes on. If we're not directly affected, it's really easy to forget about what happened, go on with our day-to-day, and lose sight of the real and total impact an injury has, both on the individual that sustained that injury, their family, their coworkers, everybody involved. And so With that, I'll start up this next video. Hopefully the sound works for everybody. I see a note from Kyle, the audio only works on your computers, so I'll try to have my computer close to the phone line again to see if that might be able to help.
It was a large ring, about 95 inches. It was a 3/8 thick. And we didn't have that capacity, on that machine. We need to bend it. We needed to make some tweak things around. I can't, make this gasket because, the guards are on there. So, well, remove them. Never thought that an accident was going to happen. What could happen? What could happen? I remove those guards, I make the ring, and we go along. But guess what? I had, all of a sudden, as soon as I knew, I started, bending that ring. There was my hand in there. And it just crossed a lot of things through your mind. Again, your family, your kids. What's going to happen if I'm not going to be able to use my hand?
So again, that's just a brief little highlight introduction video, but I'm not sure if we might actually be able to get some comments through here, but if there are for some questions here. One question I'd love to see if some people might have some insight into is, in this case, the gentleman's name is Carlos. He sustained a finger amputation, as I said, and he's sharing his personal story. Not only did he volunteer to do this for all of MPRO, but his story has been shared widely outside of our organization as well. And if you have any thoughts as to why he may do that, you can throw them in the comment section here, and we'll, we can touch base on those. So, a little bit of background in this particular case. This incident happened down in Houston in 1996. Had a plant with a historically bad, for us anyway, historically bad or historically poor safety record, and had some severe injuries, including this amputation. 4 fingers were actually amputated, 2 were able to be reattached, but a significant injury here. Carlos still works for us in a different role. The last I knew, he's in a quality role, but still working for us. And the culture at that plant has changed dramatically over the years. I'm not sure if he caught it just due to the audio issues, but Carlos made mention of he was asked to take a guard off a machine to get a product out the door to satisfy a customer. And obviously that's a pretty poor level of safety culture. We're not even at the compliance stage when we're asking people to remove machine guarding to do a task. Today is a much different scenario, and I actually think there's, again, some videos on our website with a little pep rally they hold every Friday morning and things of that nature, but I don't know the exact length of time, but I know they've been celebrating a pretty long stretch here with no injuries. Carlos married 5 kids. He talks about that in the video. He's very concerned about his ability to work after this incident. Supervisor actually was not terminated in this case, but left on their own. That would be a much different situation today, obviously within the business. And there's some speaking items here that you can go through if you were to conduct this training, but it touches base on the corrective action at the time. But really what I find most important about this video as part of this program is, why did Carlos share his story? All these other things, all these other questions for dialogue are great, but fundamentally, why did Carlos choose to share his story? And I believe it was obviously to help communicate to every single one of his colleagues not to take safety for granted, not to ever put yourself obviously in harm's way, that you do have the authority and responsibility to do something if you see an unsafe act or unsafe condition. But I also think that Carlos helped drive us down a path that fundamentally has changed the way we interact with one another. And really lead us down this discussion of safety my voice. I see this video as Carlos's personal my voice for safety. It's a little hard to, again, get into a dialogue, obviously, on a webinar to help explain this particular tool, but what the My Voice tool allows you as an individual to do is take time to reflect You can see some of these questions right here in front of you. Was there a time when safety didn't feel important to you? What did that look like to an outside observer? Was there a direct consequence of your belief or your actions? Let's try to take root of what matters most to us in the world to help us really latch on to the why we need to look at things or do things a bit differently. And for some of us, that's family. Others, it's friends. We all have something that's personal and important to us that we can really latch on to help really drive home this personal responsibility and accountability. Reflecting on any unsafe acts that we've participated in. What did it look like? What were the consequences? And when did you really begin to believe that safety was the ultimate priority? Part of this training is to create that space to start journaling these ideas, with the end outcome in Module 4 to be a group sharing in a community setting. If every single person in our business fundamentally understands what Carlos went through, what that did to him, what impact that had on him and his family, and how that helped shape his beliefs today, if he ever were to approach somebody about a safety opportunity, they would fully understand the perspective that he's coming from and probably look at him much differently than if they had no background knowledge on him at all. And I think that communicating that safety my voice verbally to one another really helps create this culture of looking out for one another. It's something that is not necessarily common in the workplace today to get emotional and to share our personal thoughts and our feelings, but I think it's essential when it comes to a safety culture development that people take the time to truly reflect on what safety means to them and what they want to do and how they want to look moving forward and what they plan to do to make sure that they're always in line with what they fundamentally want themselves to be doing from a safety perspective. And I don't think that many companies, again, spend time actively trying to develop this area, let alone sharing it with one another. But it's this process that first and foremost helps every single individual understand why they need to pay attention to their own personal actions. But it also, again, is what I feel has helped make our observation, our safety opportunity reporting process, or unsafe behavior reporting process successful, because it's coming from a place of true authenticity. I care enough about you as an individual that I can't simply walk by. And that is a completely different scenario than I have to do 2 of these observations every month, or I feel like I might be able to get you in trouble or give myself an advantage by turning this in. It's this tool that really helps drive that cultural change. And I am cognizant of the time on the webinar, and I want to leave time for Q&A, and so I'll just touch base on a couple of the fundamentals. One of the key characteristics of the Safety My Voice is using I statements and having authentic communication with one another. We're not there to blame or criticize or judge or shame other people, but rather make sure that what we're saying is truthful, authentic, and that we're not deflecting by using terms like us or we or they, but taking ownership of the things that are coming out of our mouth through the use of I statements. We need to make sure that we're communicating in a respectful manner. That does not mean that we shouldn't challenge one another, and it does not mean that we can't have that challenging conversation if need be. So just to kind of wrap that up, and to wrap up Module 1, we would be going through what all the general conditions are, working as groups to share experiences, share learnings, share methodology to help make sure that we can remove ourselves from those conditions if we find ourselves there. We're going to move into trying to make that personal connection through sharing of a story. In the case of SafetyFirst, it's that Choose Safety video with Carlos. And then facilitating a conversation with everybody as to why that is important from a cultural perspective. And lastly, in Module 1, we're going to actively make sure that we devote time to creation of this internal development of the ethic or of the value. We'll take time to journal out. We're going to take time to think about it as we go through Modules 2 and 3 and come back to it again in Module 4. It's an uncomfortable conversation for many people to have, and so to roll it all out in Module 1, I feel would not be as successful. We introduced the subject. We asked people to reflect on it. We're going to touch base again on it in Module 2, as well as Module 3. We always go back and cover the information we covered in a previous module just to make sure we have that repetition. But in Module 4 is when we're going to make sure that we're devoting time to have that conversation as a group, as a collective, or a community. So with that, before we close out on one of the slides, I guess I'll open it up to any Q&A, and I think, Maria, you'll kind of be leading that.
Yes, so John, thank you so much for your presentation. Now moving into the Q&A portion of the webinar, I have a couple questions already coming in, so please feel free to use that question tab on the bottom left of your screen. John, first question. You shared how Carlos's injury was handled at the time of the incident. How would it be handled differently today?
I think first and foremost, whether or not there was actually an injury or an incident, if there was ever somebody in a leadership position that directed somebody or even mentioned the idea of removing a guard, there would be a clear corrective action at that place or at that point in time. I'm not going to say right off the bat that you're out the door, because obviously there are opportunities for development and discussion, but I would lean more often than not towards, if you've been with us and you understand what safety means to us as a business and that comment comes out of your mouth, we just don't have room for leaders that would promote that type of behavior. From a fixing of the issue perspective that fundamentally led to this, I mean, again, afterwards, if everything happened the exact same way, again, I don't think that supervisor would remain with our business. I think that there are certain fundamentals, cardinal rules, whatever you want to call them, life-saving rules, things like that, that if there's willful intention to violate a rule, in this case, removing a machine guard or a safety device, it's a non-negotiable. And again, I always believe in development. I always believe in helping people understand the why. But if all of that was done and this action was still taken, there would obviously be direction taken to make sure that doesn't happen within our business again with that individual. But from an actually fixing the issue, in this case, I know they outsourced the product. I believe it was a product. This is before my time. I was actually back in high school when this happened, so I'm only speaking out to what I've been communicated on. But I believe that they sent it out because it's a product we didn't make very often. Now, if we couldn't make that product with the equipment that we have, with the safety features that we have on the equipment, we simply wouldn't perform the task. I know that sounds very simple, but that would not only be the expectation of the leadership within the business. I believe that would be the action that you would see as well. If we don't have the right equipment to make this job, I'm sorry, we'll try to find a methodology to do that, but we're not going to try to make something happen first and foremost. So that's kind of a long-winded way of trying to get back to that, but I certainly think there would be actions taken on the personnel. I think there would be actions taken to address the root cause of the issue if it was something that we're going to remain in our business long term. We always look at incidents like this with an eye of how do we make sure that this never, ever, ever happens again in our business. And we also have part of our corrective action loop that really focuses on the personal accountability of the leadership team. In previous webinars, I've talked about our care management process, hot seat calls, but we also had an instance where we had a near miss. Guy cut through a live electrical line, and even our leadership, recognized that there were failures at the EHS position within the facilities team, and there was a self-imposed discipline that came out. We'd always be ready to point the finger to somebody that makes that unsafe decision, but we also had to look in the mirror and say, okay, here's the things that we did or did not do that contributed to this, and there should be accountability there as well.
I think we have time for about one more quick question. What is the typical time frame for covering all 4 modules of SafetyFirst?
That's a great question, and I think it's obviously dependent a little bit on your size and structure. I personally like to approach all 4 modules individually. For Module 1, Module 2, I can see an hour and a half or so in training time, maybe 2-hour training event for each of those. Module 3 could also go in the same time period. In Module 4, where we really get into my voice, is the one that could start to go for a long time. In my experience, when you actually create the atmosphere, if you're sitting in a circle and we've removed all the barriers from in front of one another and we start to actually share on that personal level, that authentic level, I certainly don't want to put a cap on that. If we're having good dialogue and people are really opening up, we're going to let that go for as long as it can go. And I think there's also periods of silence in that discussion that have to be taken into account, but if you've got 20 people in a training session and each one takes 5 minutes to share, we can start to add up the time. Plus there's subject matter there already. So I usually account for an hour and a half to 2 hours for Module 1, Module 2, Module 3. I try to keep the class size in that 20 to 25 max. I want to be able to make sure that we're making a connection with everybody and that we have time for those group discussions and group learnings. Module 4, I'll oftentimes earmark almost a half a day for that class. It doesn't always take that long. Sometimes we're out in 2.5 hours. But I always want to make sure that I always have the time to keep going if that's the direction that the conversation is headed.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, John. We're getting close to that 3 o'clock mark, so we want to thank everyone for joining us on this webinar today. The couple questions that we did not get to, we will be sure to answer via email when we also send a copy of today's presentation. I want to invite everyone to look at our last slide. This has all of our upcoming events and trainings for 2017. Please also go to our website, nprolearning.com. You can find out more information about each course from SafetyFirst, which is that 2-day in classroom style training, which will go through all 4 modules of SafetyFirst. We also have 2 safety summits throughout the year. These take place this year in Columbia, South Carolina and Denver, Colorado. So we would invite you to attend this 2-day session where you actually really get in-depth training on the manufacturing floor. We also offer supervisor leadership training, care management, and safety action team training. So we invite you all to look at our website, and we will also stick around after the webinar to answer any questions that you may have about the SafetyFirst course or any other courses that we offer throughout the year. So thank you so much again for joining us, and please join us again.
I'm not sure, Maria, if you're looking to facilitate some of the questions. I see one jumping up below about one of the safety summits in terms of how to register.
Yes, so question from Chris, if I wanted to attend a summit, how do I sign up?
Yeah, I think there's a link right there at the bottom of the page that would take you to a website and follow. It's a pretty quick and easy way to register. If for whatever reason, obviously, you have problems, there's a contact us function as well, and we'd be able to help get you through that via email. But if you head to our website there, www.nprolearning.com/safety training, you'll see all the different courses. They all have a learn more link as well as a register now link that'll take you through to see where they're being held as well as to get signed up for the event. I'm not sure if you can see any more. It looks like you were seeing some questions earlier that I wasn't able to, so I guess that looks like all of them on my end besides content, which I'll follow up with via
Yes,
email
that's
after.
everything that I see.
Okay. Well, I guess thanks to everybody again for joining, and look forward to seeing you down the road on some of our upcoming webinars.